Welcome to the future of thought. Today, we're looking at something fundamental, how we approach dialogue. We want to try and stop arguing about the best conversational method. Should I use Socratic questioning or should I debate? And instead, start matching the conversational mode to the job that actually needs doing. We've been digging into some really interesting research that suggests why so many important conversations, well, they just break down. And it's not usually about using the wrong trick or tactic. It's often because we fundamentally misunderstand the purpose of the talk in the first place.
That's such a key point. If you try to do two different kinds of conversational jobs with one set of tools, the whole thing just tends to fall apart. So our mission today is really to pull out this decision guide that seems to be hiding in this source material. It's built around what the research calls the 3 modes of dialogue. And these modes define conversations purely by what they are for. So if you can name the purpose, you can pick the right tool. It saves time, protects your reputation, and honestly avoids a lot of that emotional friction we all feel.
Right, and just a quick note for everyone listening, if you want the full context, the AI persona we used to synthesize this research and the source material itself, it's all linked in the Substack description just below.
Okay, so the foundational idea here, it sounds simple, but it's powerful. Mixing these modes breaks expectations, and that really erodes trust, sometimes severely. Think about it, maybe trying to use persuasive tactics when you told someone, hey, I'm just here to listen and understand. It's like conversational sabotage, basically. There's this scholar, Habermas, who made a really useful distinction here. Are you operating with what he called a communicative orientation? So genuinely aiming for shared understanding, moving forward together, or are you using a strategic orientation where your goal is already set? You want success, maybe victory, perhaps even manipulation. Starting with that communicative intent, that shared goal, is just crucial no matter which mode you end up in.
Okay, let's try and unpack this, starting with mode 1. So this mode is all about negotiation or deliberation. The purpose here is very practical. It's focused on moving forward, either reaching a workable shared decision, under specific constraints, or, and this might seem a bit different, it's about repairing harm, restoring legitimacy to a relationship or maybe even a community.
Hold on, though. I want to push back on that link a bit. Reaching a workable decision and repairing a relationship. Those feel like really different jobs. Why group those together in mode 1?
That's a fair question. A really critical point, actually. They get bundled together because they share this common requirement, legitimacy. Whether you're making a big corporate decision or trying to fix things after a conflict, the outcome only really sticks if everyone involved accepts the result and, importantly, the process as fair. So the result has to feel legitimate to everyone. This mode works best when you've got, say, multiple stakeholders, maybe with competing interests, or when you really need that durable buy-in that lasts long after the conversation's over.
Okay, that helps frame it. Legitimacy is the key.
Yeah.
Could you give us an example then? How does that dual-purpose legitimacy for a decision or for repair, how does that actually play out in a specific method people might recognize?
Sure, yeah. For reaching a decision, the classic example is principled negotiation. This was popularized by the Harvard Negotiation Project. The core idea, the mechanism, is shifting the focus completely. You move away from fixed positions like, I want the blue car, towards shared, deeper interests, something like, I need reliable transport that saves me money. By focusing on those underlying interests and using objective criteria, you stop just, dividing up a fixed pie. You actually start creating value together, or as they often put it, expanding the pie.
Right, that makes sense for finding mutual gains, especially in, say, business deals. But what about the other side? What does that legitimacy requirement look like when the job is repairing harm?
Yeah, for relationship repair, a good example is restorative justice circles. These are very inclusive, structured kinds of dialogues. They're designed specifically to respond when harm has been done. The mechanism there is making sure that all the affected participants, the person who was harmed, the person who caused the harm, maybe other community members, that they all have an equal voice in defining what the harm actually was, and crucially in figuring out the path forward together to rebuild that trust. If everyone agrees on that path, then the legitimacy is, well, hopefully restored.
Okay, so the big strength of this mode 1, is that the outcome, whatever it is, decision or reconciliation, it's durable. It lasts because the process itself felt fair.
That's the idea. But, and here's the crucial guardrail for this mode, the main risk is that it just becomes process theater. If the facilitation is obviously unfair, or if the, quote, balanced materials provided in something like a deliberative polling exercise are secretly slanted one way, well, you lose legitimacy instantly.
Right. It undermines the whole point.
Or if someone uses, say, a restorative justice circle just to shame the person who caused harm or to force an outcome they wanted all along, they're basically importing that strategic, self-interested orientation into what needs to be a communicative, shared space. And the repair effort just fails completely.
Okay, before we move on to the next modes, how we approach shifting minds and testing beliefs, just a quick pause. If you find this kind of structured thinking helpful, understanding the right tool for the right job, if that clarifies things for you, please take just a second right now to click like, subscribe, and maybe ring the bell. It genuinely helps us figure out what kind of strategic knowledge you want us to keep exploring here. All right, now let's look at the second major mode, persuasion.
Okay, so now the goal shifts. We're moving from that collective agreement or repair towards individual change. You got it. The purpose here is really singular and clear. You want to shift someone's beliefs or change their behavior. This mode is inherently directional. It has a target. However, and this is maybe the most important caveat, this mode absolutely requires informed, explicit consent to the persuasive format. You really can't sneak persuasion into a conversation that was set up as, say, Mode 3 inquiry, where you promise just to listen and understand. That's a fast way to break trust. This mode, persuasion, is best when there's a clear position you need to defend, maybe in a public forum, or when you have a specific behavior change goal in a one-on-one setting like coaching or therapy.
I get the goal-changing minds or actions, but what does success actually look like here? Often we think of persuasion as, aggressive arguments trying to win, but it sounds like your sources point to more constructive ways to achieve that.
They definitely do. One classic public method is the Oxford-style debate. You have two sides arguing a very specific motion, right? And the mechanism here is clarity through contrast. The audience votes before the debate and then again after, specifically to measure how opinions shifted. It's actually fantastic for clarifying public trade-offs. It really forces both sides to bring their absolute best arguments, their best evidence. It makes the choice, for the audience at least, much sharper.
Okay, so that gives you that sharp comparative clarity. That's definitely a persuasive effect. But what about when the goal isn't winning over a crowd, but maybe helping one person make an internal shift?
Right. On the personal one-on-one side, a great example is motivational interviewing, often called MI. This is a collaborative counseling style, and it really emphasizes respecting the person's autonomy. Unlike traditional persuasion, where, the persuader argues for the change, MI uses questions and reflections to guide the person to explore and express their own reasons, their own goals, their own motivation for change. It's incredibly powerful, especially when someone feels ambivalent. They kind of know they should change, but part of them really doesn't want to.
That's fascinating because it feels like it almost borders on inquiry, doesn't it? Mode 3. The interviewer spends so much time asking questions, listening deeply. Why is it definitively put under persuasion, Mode 2?
That's a really insightful point. It uses inquiry tactics like open questions and reflections, but the underlying orientation is strategic. It has a predetermined, albeit usually therapeutic, goal, behavior change. So the process feels collaborative, which is key to its success, but the job it's trying to do is ultimately persuasive. The source material really highlights the strengths here. Debate gives you that sharp clarity, but MI, when done well and with genuine consent, can lead to real, lasting behavioral shifts because the motivation comes from within the person.
But the risks are definitely there, aren't they? Debate can easily reward just scoring points, maybe being aggressive, rather than fostering real understanding. That's not great for civic health. And MI, even though it seems gentle, it's absolutely not a tool for coercion. If you try to force the method onto someone who isn't ready or willing to reflect on change, it just becomes manipulative. That consent piece has to be explicit and ongoing.
Which brings us perfectly to the third mode, and I think this is often the essential starting point that, frankly, almost everyone skips: inquiry information seeking.
Yes. This feels like where the real work should almost always begin, doesn't it?
I think so. If Mode 1 is about deciding or repairing, and Mode 2 is about changing minds or actions, then Mode 3 is purely about understanding why. The purpose of Mode 3 is to understand and maybe rigorously test the reasons behind something, to surface those hidden underlying assumptions, to check how reliable the evidence or the reasoning method is. And crucially, it's about reducing the emotional heat before you jump into deciding or persuading. This mode is absolutely best when the stakes are high, and making a premature commitment based on shaky ground would be really costly.
Like launching a new product based on a hunch, maybe.
Or having a huge blow-up argument with someone because you misunderstood what they meant. Getting clarity first prevents that.
Yeah, this really does sound like the essential groundwork for any good decision or even just a healthy relationship. Can you maybe outline a few specific techniques people use to get this kind of deep clarity, this epistemic hygiene, as some call it?
Definitely. We can start with the classic Socratic questioning. This is that systematic probing of definitions, asking about underlying assumptions, exploring implications, looking for exceptions. It's used all the time in education, in therapy too, to deepen understanding. The mechanism isn't about the questioner providing answers, but forcing the other person to really check the integrity of their own thinking. It helps make sure you actually know what you think you know and why.
Okay, that's Socratic questioning, often one-on-one. What if you want to achieve that kind of clarity in a group setting?
Right. For groups trying to get that shared clarity, there's something called Bohm dialogue, named after the physicist David Bohm. This is usually an agenda-free group activity. The focus is purely on thinking together. The key is participants suspending their assumptions, maybe their judgments, letting go of hierarchies for a bit, to allow new shared meaning to just emerge collectively. It's like collaborative thinking on a larger scale, focused entirely on understanding the landscape of thought before anyone takes action.
Okay, and this next one seems particularly relevant today, especially for understanding how people form beliefs and why they hold them so strongly.
Yes. That brings us to street epistemology, or SE. This is a specific kind of civil, very consent-based questioning method. It focuses less on what someone believes and much more on how they arrived at that belief. It's about checking the reliability of the methods they use to conclude something is true. You might hear questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in that belief? Or, what kind of evidence, if someone showed it to you, might cause you to lower your confidence a bit?
The power of inquiry, Mode 3, seems phenomenal. It naturally lowers defensiveness because you're not attacking the belief itself. It dramatically increases clarity for everyone involved. And it improves the quality of any later decisions because you've built them on a more rational, well-understood foundation.
Huge upsides. The risk, though, and it's a significant one, is that inquiry can sometimes be misread or misused as covert persuasion. If you use Socratic methods, or SE, not to genuinely understand but to secretly guide someone towards your predetermined conclusion, well, you've broken that communicative orientation. You've shifted to strategic manipulation, probably without consent. And that just destroys the trust that Mode 3 is supposed to be carefully building. It backfires badly.
And just a reminder here, if you, the listener, are interested in really honing those inquiry skills, particularly around how people form beliefs and how to respectfully test the reasons behind them, you can actually take a free street epistemology course online. It's at navigatingbeliefs.com. That resource is perfectly aligned with this Mode 3 purpose of epistemic hygiene.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together now into a quick decision guide for you. That simple question we started with right at the top of the show, the one that can instantly improve pretty much any tough conversation, is simply asking yourself, what is the real job of this conversation right now? So if the job is to decide or repair something together right up at den, then you should be using negotiation deliberation Mode 1 tools. If the job is clearly to change minds or behavior right other, then you need persuasion Mode 2 tools used with consent. And if the job is primarily to clarify understanding or test the reasons behind something right other, then you absolutely start with inquiry information seeking Mode 3.
And the key rule that our source material really hammers home is, try to stay in mode while you're doing that job. So if you're in a deliberation meeting, Mode 1, don't suddenly start doing deep inquiry, Mode 3, into someone's childhood assumptions without warning. It's jarring. However, and this is important, you are encouraged to shift modes, but do it deliberately and openly as the job changes. You might start in inquiry, Mode 3, to build that crucial shared understanding first. Then, only once you both feel you have clarity, you might say, okay, now that we understand the situation better, let's shift into deliberation Mode 1 to figure out what we should do. That kind of deliberate, announced shift maintains trust.
Right. And finally, we need to quickly cover those guardrails, the simple rules for when not to use these methods. Knowing these can prevent some absolute conversational train wrecks.
Okay, for Mode 1, deliberation and negotiation. Remember, the whole process hinges on fairness and transparency. So do not attempt principled negotiation if the other parties just refuse to share their deeper interests and are totally stuck on their fixed positions. It'll just become a fight. Similarly, you should probably skip something like deliberative polling if you honestly can't guarantee truly balanced background materials and genuinely fair moderation. If the input is biased, the output lacks that legitimacy we talked about, and the whole Mode 1 purpose is just defeated.
Makes sense. What about Mode 2, Persuasion?
Well, for Mode 2 Persuasion, a key guardrail is avoid using something like an Oxford-style debate if your actual underlying goal is building consensus or repairing a relationship. Debate is specifically designed to create winners and losers. It often sacrifices relationship warmth for argumentative clarity, which is fine if everyone knows that's the game, but it's disastrous if you're actually trying to bring a team together or mend fences.
Good point. And for Mode 3, Inquiry?
For Mode 3, Inquiry, respecting the time commitment is crucial. Do not try to initiate something like Bohm dialogue if you're under a tight decision deadline. It's intentionally slow, reflective, and agenda-free. It needs space. And specifically for street epistemology, if you start asking those how do you know questions, and the other person clearly signals, hey, I just want to debate, I want to argue, you must respect that preference. Either explicitly reset expectations, okay, sounds like you prefer debate then, or disengage from the SE method. Trying to force inquiry on someone who wants confrontation just doesn't work. It fails immediately.
Okay, so here's the final provocative thought we kind of pulled from all this research. If you actually prioritize choosing the right mode, first figuring out the job of the conversation, then most of those endless method wars we see online and elsewhere, arguing about Socratic questioning versus debate versus active listening, they just sort of melt away. That simple discipline of clarifying the purpose first allows your conversations to become more coherent, definitely more purposeful, and maybe fundamentally just a bit kinder.
Yeah, and this really raises an important question for you, the listener, to reflect on. Think about a common conversation in your own life, maybe at work, maybe at home, maybe online, that feels stuck or frustrating right now. Is it possible it's stuck because it's operating in the wrong mode? Are you maybe trying to persuade Mode 2 when you really should just be inquiring Mode 3 to understand their perspective first? How might clarifying that core purpose change the whole dynamic, the outcome?
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please share your reflections and maybe start a conversation about the future of thought down in the comments section below.
Thanks for joining us. Goodbye for now.